Hey folks, Nick the GovCon Guy here, and today we're going to be talking about Sam.Gov or Sam.Gov, and we're going to be talking about it at length. And this is a companion long-form video to the short 60-second short-form video you might have seen elsewhere online, the 5 pre-qualifiers before creating a Sam.Gov account. So we're going to talk about everything related to creating a Sam.Gov account, why you need to do it, when you should do it. And this is all updated for this year, so hopefully it's timely. So let's just jump right into it. As you watch this content, if you're thinking about creating a Sam.Gov account, what you should do is just take my little video and put it off into the corner of your monitor. And as you're going through creating your own Sam.Gov account, I think what you're going to see is that I'm roughly following the sequence of events that's happening on the Sam.Gov website, and you should be able to roughly see what I'm talking about or hear what I'm talking about as you're going through the steps in a way that may make things easier for you as you go through. So first, let's talk about what is Sam.Gov. So Sam.Gov or Sam.Gov is the system for award management. And it's a clearinghouse website / database / platform that's operated by the federal government. And what it is a clearinghouse of information about entities that would like to do business in any way, shape, or form with the U.S. federal government. So, for example, that could be contracts, but it doesn't necessarily have to be contracts exclusively. It could also be for grants or loans, disaster assistance, that sort of thing. And it's a system that can be used not only by U.S. organizations, but basically any foreign organization that has some reason to want to do business with the U.S. federal government. And this would cover, corporations, nonprofits, individuals that are operating as sole proprietors, basically anything under the sun. And for those of you who go back as far as I do, this is a system that used to be called the CCR system, or the Central Contractor Registry, and that's like kind of back in the day. So the first thing that's going to happen is you'll create a login. And of course, you can decide whether at that point you would like to use the dual authentication system that they have set up, where you have to get a text message to your phone in order to log in every time. There's also a workaround to that. If you don't like doing that, there's a password system where, every time you use 15 or 20 passwords, they'll send you a new batch of passwords. So that is an alternate way of getting into the system using dual authentication if you don't want to give out your cell phone number or put it into the system for some reason. The system will ask you, why are you creating an account? So there could be different reasons for that. You could be doing it for contract awards. You could be applying for an SBA loan or disaster assistance or a grant, you name it. But they want to know why you're doing it. And it's not really, an important question. You can choose multiple reasons, but they just kind of want to know that as a part of the sign-up process. And they also want to know, is there anyone who told you should do it? Like, it could be a federal contracting officer or somebody at an Apex Accelerator location told you to do it. They just want to know that for classification purposes. As a part of the sign-up process, you're going to receive 2 new numbers that you never had before. One is a UEI, or Unique Entity Identifier, and this is a 12-digit alphanumeric code. They used to use the DUNS system until 2022. They got rid of that in favor of their own system. And the other will be a CAGE code. So CAGE would be Commercial and Government Entity Code. So that is issued by the Defense Logistics Agency. So regardless of whether or not you are selling products to the DLA, they want you to have a number in their system if you're on Sam.Gov. So you'll end up, as a part of the early parts of creating your Sam.Gov account, you'll end up having a UEI and a CAGE code. So that is happening very early in the process. And what's really unique about that is that as a result of creating a UEI and a CAGE code, you already have a TIN, or a taxpayer identification number. So if you're a sole proprietor, that's going to be your social security number. Or if you have a legal structure, corporation or LLC, then you're going to have an EIN number. So they have 3 numbers at that point to use for identification purposes. So they're not going to get it wrong. They're going to know who you are one way or the other. As a part of the process, you are going to have at your fingertips an electronic document issued by your state. and that might be like the Secretary of State or the Department of Corporations or whatever it's called in your state, that shows the legal name of your company and the recognized legal address of that company. And again, even if you're operating as a sole proprietor or a DBA, it can say all of that in the document, right? It might say John Smith, right, with your address. Or if you're a corporation, it'll say XYZ, LLC with the address of that entity. I'm about to say the most important thing that I will say in the entirety of this video, and that is this. Make sure when you go to create your Sam.Gov account that the document that you're referencing and uploading to the system as a part of your account creation, make sure it accurately reflects the data you're going to be inputting into the data entry fields for Sam.Gov. So for example, if you don't like the address that your state has on file for you, don't put a different address in Sam.Gov. Go get the address updated first on your state system, on your state's website, so that you can pull down a document that has the address that you're manually entering into Sam.Gov. And I can't stress this enough. Make sure the information you enter for your legal company name and your address is a character for character match with what is on that document from your state registration website or platform, whatever you're going to be uploading from in your state. Because if it's wrong, you will be in Sam.Gov hell. Or let's just call it purgatory, because you'll eventually get out of it. But it's just very important that you know this, that you know that it's important that that information matches what you're about to put into Sam.Gov and it matches what's on that document from the door. Very important. Next, the system will ask you, is there someone that is doing this for you? So it gives you a way to enter information of a party that is doing this for you. If you have a party doing it for you, they want to know if there's a third party that's helping you with your application. Who is that party and what is the duration of that contractual relationship with that third party helping you with your Sam.Gov account? So that is something that's a part of the process as well. The next part of the process is filling out core data. Core data is going to be all of the most basic pieces of information about your organization, whether you're an LLC or a corporation or a sole proprietor. It's going to ask you for your social or for your EIN if you're using that through a corporate structure. It's also going to ask you if you qualify for any designations such as veteran-owned business or woman-owned business. We're going to talk more about that in a bit. And it's also going to ask you for your checking and routing number. And why is that? That's because they assume you're going to be doing business with them in some way, shape, or form. And if they need to push money to you, that's how they're assuming they're going to do it. That's why they're asking that information. So it's important you know that you have to put that into the system in order to proceed. If you're taking credit cards, for example, they also want to know that. That's sort of a yes or no. But the thing about Sam.Gov is you can always edit your profile or your account later. You're not sort of stuck to one answer. It's something that you can revisit whenever something changes, and we encourage you to do that. As a part of this process, they're going to ask you if in the last 5 years there are any federal, criminal, or civil proceedings involving your company or any of the principals of your company. They're also going to ask if there are any unpaid taxes, because that could gum up the works and that may stop you from doing business with the federal government. If those things are true, they're going to ask for those items. So be prepared to answer those questions at that part of the sign-up process. Next, they're going to ask for your assertions. And the first thing they're going to ask for there are the products and services that your company provides. And this you're primarily going to disclose by selecting NAICS codes, or the North American Industry Classification System codes. It's very important that you not go to Sam.Gov to create an account until you have a thorough understanding of what your NAICS code, singular, or codes would be. So it's very common that a company might have more than one NAICS code. And this is a part of the Sam.Gov sign-up process where it's better to err on the side of including things that you believe that you do today. And you can even put in things that you believe you will soon be doing, right? So it's an area of the system where, it doesn't necessarily have to reflect 100% what you do today. It could also be kind of like where you're headed as an organization. So you can put in one or more NAICS codes, and that is going to be an important step of the process because those must be accurate. Next, the system's going to ask you for size data, and it's primarily going to do that by asking you your revenue, and it's also going to ask your number of employees. And it's referencing a part of the federal acquisition regulations when it does that. Here's why. Every NAICS code has a revenue or employee total based threshold where they determine whether or not you are a small business or not a small business under that NAICS code. So if you put in one NAICS code, that's fine. If you do a very specific thing, you're going to put in your revenue, you're going to put in your employee totals, and then you'll see later on that the system is asking you to confirm whether you are or are not a small business because it's referencing the revenue totals depending on your NAICS code, if it's a revenue-based NAICS code, or it's looking at your employee totals if it's an employee total-based standard for determining whether or not you're a small business. And so it's going to ask you to put those numbers in as a very important part of the process. When you put those numbers in, consider your affiliates. So affiliates is a term of art in federal contracting. So for example, if you're a landscaping company and you're starting a landscaping company, but oh, by the way, you're part owner of another landscaping company with your cousin, and you have the ability to control both landscaping companies, they don't just want the revenue of the newer company, they want the total revenue of all of the companies that you have the ability to control. Or, as another example, if you are a wholly owned subsidiary of a different company, they want the revenue of both. Because even if it's a new LLC or corporation, if it's controlled by a parent, they consider you affiliates and they want the revenue or employee totals of both. So affiliation is an important thing to know and understand before you start filling things in the system if you have other businesses that are related to, even indirectly, the business you're registering on Sam.Gov right now. The next thing the system will ask would be a bunch of questions related to FAR provisions. This will be a laundry list of items in the federal acquisition regulations that the system is asking you to address item by item. Typically, it's going to be a yes or a no question. And most of these questions simply will not apply to your business. The system requires an answer on most of these items. Whenever you can defer an answer by saying, we'll give you that information with a specific offer, you should do that. But you really need to try to understand while you're looking at these items, which of these things have bearing on your business, because it's not a system that's set up that lets you or that encourages you to just rubber stamp things. You need to try to understand which of these FAR provisions have a specific bearing on your business and which can you just sort of answer and move on. So that's a very important part of the process, is trying to understand which of these FAR provisions really matter to your business and answering them accordingly. Also, as a part of the reps and certs process, you're going to see a table that lists out your NAICS codes, the ones that you entered earlier, with a Y or an N for yes or no, indicating whether or not you are a small business in relation to that NAICS code. So if you have one NAICS code and you put in your revenue or your employee total, it's going to say yes or no. If that seems like it makes sense to you, you're good to go. If you have multiple NAICS codes that you put into the system, what you need to know is that you can be large in one NAICS code and small in another, depending on the number of employees you have or the revenue totals, because the thresholds vary by NAICS code, and it's important that you understand that. So the other thing about all of this is it's not the kind of representation that you want to make lightly. You don't want to assume that you're a small business. You don't want to assume that you do not have affiliates, because invariably what happens in federal government contracting is that if you become the awardee, or if other companies that know you are competing with you for contracts, they have a vested interest in holding your feet to the fire as to whether or not you are actually a small business. So you don't want to make an assertion that you are a small business in a certain NAICS code unless you know it to be true based on your revenue totals over 5 years or your employee totals over the last 2 years, and whether or not you have any affiliates that would cause you to combine your revenue with the revenue of an affiliate. So it's not good enough to say, well, I thought I was a small business, because ultimately when large dollar value contracts come up, if you're being considered for them, other people will keep you honest. So it's very important that you get it right. This also applies to your statuses. So for example, small disadvantaged or woman-owned small business. I wouldn't willy-nilly just, select that you are a woman-owned business or that you're a small disadvantaged business. And you could read lots and lots online about what is currently happening with the small disadvantaged status and how it's becoming a little bit harder to assert that status. And I wouldn't necessarily select that you are a woman-owned business unless you fully and completely understand what that means, because it's not as simple as a woman owns part of the business. So there's a lot more to that, more layers of that onion, so to speak. So keep that in mind. Next, the system will ask you to put in a number of points of contact, and there's several for different reasons. You could put one person for all of them, whoever's managing the GSA process for you in-house. Put your own name if you feel that's appropriate, but yeah, not a big deal in terms of the data. Just put something in there that makes sense, that is not likely to change. So you don't want to put names in there where there's constantly turnover. Put a name in there where you think that person or that name will not change for a very long time. Next, the system will ask if you would like to be if you are a small business, a part of the dynamic small business search. And that is an SBA website where they're feeding information from Sam.Gov to a public portal. And here's why that's important. If, for example, a federal contracting officer is doing research, and let's just say they're looking to see if they can set aside contracts for landscaping work in North Dakota at a military base, and they want to see if they can set it aside for small business, they can go to that portal and put in the NAICS code for landscaping and just see how many small businesses in North Dakota are eligible to do business with the federal government because they have a SAM account, right? And so that's a way of federal contracting officers to do research on whether or not they can set work aside for small business or disabled vet or hub zone or woman-owned or disadvantaged or what have you. So I encourage you, if you are a small business, to include yourself in that search, because prime contractors who have subcontracting expectations put on them at the contract level or at the task order level, they're often using that portal as well to identify potential subcontractors for different activities that they are considering for subcontracting in a larger award. Next, the system's going to present you with a checkout form, if you will, a list of everything that you've put into the system, everything you've asserted, all of the information you put in, all of your reps inserts. And at the bottom, it's going to ask you to sign off that all of this information is true and correct. So if it is correct, you're just going to check that off and submit your registration details, and that will start the process of the folks who review these looking at your application to determine whether or not you have any shortcomings in it or whether it's good to go, and you can have an account on Sam.Gov that is that's ready and available to the public. As a part of the process, during sign-up, after sign-up, if there's any problems, you're going to be getting emails from different systems. The main thing you need to know is there's one customer support number for the main sort of Sam.Gov website. But if there's a problem with your cage code as it relates to the DLA, there's sort of a separate group, a separate customer service number. So just realize that, one party may not be talking to the other. So you really want to try to understand if there's a problem with your sign-up, who you should be talking to, and make sure both parties understand that you're working with one or the other, depending on what the issue is. You should have a plan for how you are going to do your updates to your Sam.Gov profile annually. And by the way, you can do it as often as you like, and the expectation from the federal government is that if something changes with your company, you must proactively update your Sam.Gov profile. So if you add a NAICS code, for example, if you gain a certification, if you lose the ability to assert certain things about your company, you have an affirmative responsibility to update your Sam.Gov whenever that happens, but not at least annually. Let's put it that way. Most important, do not misrepresent your size or your statuses, hub zone, disabled vet, what have you, because all of this is under penalty of perjury. So you want to make sure that you get those right based on really good information from people who know what they're talking about. And if you're looking for a source for leads, for bids, RFPs, and solicitations for government contracts at the state and local and federal level, check out mygovwatch.com. No annual contract, pay-as-you-go model with real people who can help you find what you're looking for. Take it from Nick the GovCon Guy. He's got all the answers.